All right. So, hey, everyone. I am so excited. I'm here with Rachel Real and Chris Caramonte. Or Monty. Dang, I never get your name right, Chris.
It's all right.
I
No
want to
worries.
make it French.
Please do.
And Rachel is in Illinois and Chris is in Iowa. I appreciate you guys coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Last week we talked about is exclusive right to list really the best way for us to protect ourselves and sellers, or are there other ways? So that actually brought up a lot of discussion. So we wanted to do this bonus episode and really brainstorm and see if we can, I don't know, come up with some ideas that might be better. Rachel, what are your thoughts on?
So we talked about two different things. We talked about, or the episode talked about open listings and net listings.
Right.
So open listing would be, for lack of a better term, going after a listing in such a way that you would go after a for sale by owner. Right. So no listing agreement, no nothing, just open. A seller would put it out to several agents and say, hey, whoever brings me a buyer, great.
And that's not really the best either, because how can you market the property?
Well, that's like me giving my taxes to 5 different accountants and saying, hey, whoever gets me the best return, I'll pay you.
Actually, that might be kind of, no, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of cons with that.
I feel like that's a great idea.
Right, but who's gonna? I don't want to do that as an agent. That's not. There's no exposure in the MLS because you can't. You can't offer compensation when you don't have written authority to offer the compensation.
True.
So the MLS doesn't allow that, at least where we're at.
Okay.
You won't, as an agent, you're not going to spend money. You're not going to spend time and effort marketing a listing that you're not going to get paid, that potentially you get no payment for if you don't bring a buyer.
So it's not even really better for the seller either.
I would say, in my opinion, no, because if I've got people that are under contract with an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, and then somebody that's an open listing, where are my efforts going?
Right.
What
do you think, Chris? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think I agree with it. I think we had talked about maybe doing something like a 30-day or a 3-week contract, with exclusive contract.
Yeah.
And I think that could be fun.
That could be interesting. So let's dive down the rabbit hole. So you get a listing and you're saying, okay, for 3 weeks, I have exclusive right to, let's assume that the average days on market is 21 days or less.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So if they are, then it's like, okay, this house theoretically, based on the data, should sell in 3 weeks. Right.
Right. And your best traffic's going to be in the first 3 weeks anyways, right?
Right. Or the first hour. Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So what would happen?
I think you give 3 weeks. If we're saying 3 weeks, you give them 3 weeks to get it sold. And if you can't get it sold after 3 weeks, it opens back up.
Do you think you should get some type of bonus if you do sell it in less than that? If the average days is 3 weeks, but you sell it in less.
Yeah, you could definitely do something like that, because I think, you don't want to be running around, spending a bunch of marketing dollars on houses that you only get 3 weeks to sell. And if they're not selling, then you're just losing money. So doing some kind of bonus like that for getting it sold in a short amount of time. I don't like it as much because I think it can put some kind of level of distrust between us and our sellers, where they think we're pricing it lower than we need to or something like that in order to get a bonus. But
yeah, I guess so. But what do you guys think about? I mean, the comparables and the relevant properties the data is there.
The data's there. Yeah.
Right. It's just getting a seller to understand the data like we understand it, and agree that what price that we would list the property at is where they're comfortable at. So I can have all the data in the world to support a list price, but if that seller's like, no, I want to price it 10,000 higher, then there's no way in hell I'm doing a 1 month or a 1 month listing.
Yeah. So what if that's the caveat? It's okay, so here's the data, and based on this data, it looks like if we price it here, it will sell within the average days on market, which, as you can see by these relevant properties, is less than 3 weeks. So if we price it here, we'll do a 3-week exclusive right to sell where the compensation is X amount, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then after that, what?
Well, you've got two ideas. I mean, I've seen I've seen situations where, somebody says, a seller will say, hey, well, if we sell it in the first 3 weeks, then I want to pay you less. When in theory, if I can sell it in the first 3 weeks, you should be paying me more.
Look, if I'm going to the dentist and they're like, I can pull all your teeth really, really fast, but it's going to cost you more money, or I can pull them really, really, really slow, but it'll be cheaper. I'm pulling them fast.
I'm pulling them fast. Absolutely. Well, then you've got the scenario too. So I'm dealing with a seller right now who in no way, shape, or form during the time we met, and I helped this guy buy the place 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, he was a different person than he is now, but he's going through a divorce.
Okay.
In no way, shape, or form did I ever anticipate these two people would be as rotten to me via email and nasty to me as they've been 2 days on the market.
Oh.
So if I sit down and have that conversation at the listing appointment and everything's lovely, and then all of a sudden I'm getting my rear chewed out after 2 showings in 2 days because they don't like their house.
Right.
I don't know.
Are you saying then you can get out of the contract because it's only like 3 weeks?
Yeah, I suppose that would be the case, but I guess I'm looking
at do. I don't know how you guys do it, but like for us in our area, depending on the house, it's usually either a 6-month contract or a 1 year. We do 90 days, but we also do a pre-cancellation that's signed so it can unilaterally be canceled by either party. Because if the sellers are being jerks, like I don't want to stay in relationship with them. And if they think I'm not doing what I say that I would do, then I don't want them to stay in relationship with me.
Well, exactly. But I'm looking at it as, okay, so these guys, these sellers appeared like that was going to be very, a very easy, not easy, I never want to say easy, but, a pleasant experience.
Sure.
And so I agreed to do a lesser listing period with them. And then they turn around and now they're going to shut down showings. They're not going to cooperate. You know what I mean? The cooperation is far less. Now I'm going upstream without a paddle because I'm trying to do what I'm supposed to be doing in such a small window, but I'm not getting cooperation.
Yeah.
So I think we're all saying that, like, it seems like we agree that maybe there's a better way than like an exclusive right to list. I think most of the comments were like 6 months or a year, were what a lot of people are doing. So we think it's better. I feel like it should be more in line with the average days on market. But as the markets shift, right? Or like maybe there's something about the house that like what if they don't allow showings, or like there's something about it that we didn't see going forward. Like I'm just like a little unclear. To your point, Chris, it's like, okay, so we spend all this money, all the money we spend is mostly up front.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you recoup that, and is a shorter listing period better for both parties?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tricky part. I think I like what you were saying about the list price, because I feel like it's always a battle to get, to list it right, because like we talked about, the first 3 weeks are going to be your best time on the market. And so if you list it too high, then, you got too high for your first 3 weeks, and then, let's list it, where it needs to be now after all of our traffic's gone. So I feel like a shorter contract, you could have that conversation and say,
you could be a lot more flexible. And I feel like you're also like more in control of your business. Right.
For sure. And if you're telling them, I'm going to spend all this money to market your property, and I'm willing to do a 3-week or a 1-month listing contract because I'm confident we can get it sold, we've got to price it where the market says it should be priced.
But what do you think about should there be something? I mean, I know our fee, we should, as business owners, in my head, I'm like kind of like a devil and angel. So like as a business owner, like the commission that we get paid, we should be able to manage that, and that we know how much marketing we spend per listing, right?
Yep.
But should there be some type of like, or what do you think about some type of retainer that then gets credited back?
I've done a kind of a variation of that, where I've started stating in my listing agreements, if the seller chooses to cancel the listing at any point in time, then you're refunding me or reimbursing me via invoice the money that I put up front, which would be the photography and perhaps a staging consultation.
Now that's a good idea.
Well, then I'm not eating it, because if we sit down and have this conversation and I say, hey, I'm bringing in a stager, I'm bringing in professional photography, I'm walking in the door with a bill of $400, and then you want to cancel on me 2 weeks later because you and your wife had an argument and now you're canceling. Why am I out $400?
I like that. And a lot of places, a ton of places, wherever you go, they do have a cancellation. I mean, even in like our CRMs, if you get one of the big boys,
right,
then you will, if you don't fulfill your annual contract with them, you do get charged like a month or whatever,
right.
What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I've done similar, I guess. With pictures, I've never done anything like that, but with staging, I usually do. I tell them they pay for the staging up front, and when we get to closing, I'll reimburse you for it. So
what would
kind of the same
cause,
concept.
if the average days on market is like, let's say less than a month,
Yeah.
why would we then do a 90-day, 6 months or year contract? Just because it's what we always do?
Well, I think like you just talked about, there's always unforeseen things that can happen. And, no house is guaranteed to sell within a specific time period. But I think it's just, when you make that upfront investment and ongoing investment, you want an opportunity to get it done in more time than, 3 weeks. But
But if your marketing plan, if we can all agree that we can do our marketing plan within like how long? Like how long does it take you to know that you've done everything that you could to sell this house? With
or without the coronavirus?
I don't know. What's the difference?
I had one that I'm still dealing with now that I took on. We sat and did the listing agreement. We did all of the paperwork. We did the photography. We did the staging. And literally right after we did all of those things and we're ready to go, COVID hit. So the conversations we had pre-shutdown were out the door.
Then let's just say like in general, right? Because we can't really control that. And each city and state acted like it was all different, right? Because we were busier actually.
Right.
But some places like New York were totally shut down, right? So,
absolutely.
Okay, in general, how long does it take you to do your marketing plan? Where you feel like I did everything that I could for this property?
I think it's hard to say 100% on any property because you have properties that
wouldn't it be at the point
owner's going to be different? But I would say anywhere between 30 and 60 days.
It would be basically at the point where you ask for a price reduction, right?
Well, exactly. I mean,
so are you waiting 30 or 60 days for a price reduction?
No, I'm doing 2 weeks.
Okay, so
2 weeks.
So then I would say then it only takes you like 2 weeks. Then you're adding a little bit, right?
You're adding a little bit.
Just for like.
Yeah, the only challenge I could see is with doing a very short listing agreement. So say a 30-day, even if I get it under contract in 2 weeks, I still have to go back to them and ask for extensions to get us all the way to closing so that it doesn't fall off the MLS.
That's true.
So my goal is to get it sold at this period of time, but understand if we get it sold the first 30 days, it could be up to another 60 before we close. And instead of me coming back to you and asking for extension after extension,
this is like more sense. Okay, so, and that's kind of in line with what Chris was saying. It's like our job is to like implement the marketing to attract the buyers and then allow it to work. So if it sounds like we're all fairly in alignment on like a 90-day.
Right.
Yeah. So then what would cause people to, because 90 days will get you your month of working your plan and then another 60 days of like the plan working and or the offer and getting it to close. Unless, of course, you're looking at it in the average days on, this is assuming average days on market is less than 30 days, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So then why would some people, if the average days on market are less than 30 days, who is it really protecting to have a contract for 6 months or a year? Is it protecting the seller or is it protecting the agent?
I would say you're protecting the agent more, but again, I'm more flexible in going with a shorter term listing agreement if I can draft in there that they're going to reimburse those upfront expenses.
Yeah, so you're saying the shorter term with the cancellation clause.
With that cancellation, because then at least I'm my time is out the door, but at least then that money that I put up front that I can't use for anything else and they can't use for anything else is coming back.
Chris, do you think that protects the seller?
I think it protects the agent for sure, more so than the seller. The longer contract, you mean?
No, if we did like the 90 days with the cancellation.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure.
So we need to kind of come to a consensus on what are we protecting the seller what is our fiduciary responsibility in protecting the seller? What are we protecting them from? It's like us, right? Kind of.
I kind of look at it too as, in my experience, loyalty, there's very little loyalty in this business from a client standpoint.
Yeah.
So asking them to give you, 3 months or 6 months, even whatever it is to me isn't unreasonable.
Okay.
And I don't look at it as protecting one versus the other. It's just, it's part of it takes 6 months for the accountant to do your taxes too. Somebody said they could do them in a lot less time.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I'm going to go rip it out because I've had the same accountant for 10 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think I know what you mean.
I guess for me, I typically have the upfront conversation and I say, if it's not working out for some reason, you can cancel at any time.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not going to hold somebody to it if we're in a terrible relationship. But at the same time, I feel like 3 months, if it's a normal house that, you can get sold, it's not a weird property that needs to be torn down or something. If it's a regular house, in 3 months, I've completely exhausted anything.
Exhausted everything that you can do.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So
and two, like at that point, we would, let's say that doesn't, nobody can sell every house, right? So at that point, I would say exactly what you said, Chris. I'd be like, hey, we've exhausted our entire marketing plan, but here's another agent that their plan is a little bit different than mine, and they do work a lot in this area. Do you mind talking to them? Because then you can still get the referral.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And nobody wants to work with a seller relationship either. And that's part of my conversation up front too, is, hey, here's the listing term. Here's how we're going to work this. If for any reason you aren't happy at some point, I just ask that before you cancel, you give me the opportunity to correct whatever it is that you feel has gone wrong.
But then if you have that cancellation clause with the fee in it, are you then, depending on the scenario, are you not like enforcing that versus sometimes you are?
Not necessarily, because I think at least you're putting the expectation out that, hey, I think
it's like earnest money. It doesn't really mean anything, but they feel like it does.
No, I look at it, and even after 15 years, my mom still doesn't understand how this business works and how I get my business. I'm like, I have to go find it. They don't pay me. I don't get paid there. I pay them to work there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think in general, the general public on a broad spectrum, I think really doesn't understand how we get paid and how the business works. So when I use that opportunity to explain to them, this is money that's coming out of my pocket. I don't get paid on anything until you close on a property, and that could be 90 days from now.
Right.
That could be 6 months from now. That could be 4
year.
Years.
Right.
4 years from now.
Or next week. Really, it could be any.
Right. You never know.
So is there though we're saying we don't think there's a better way than at least a limited time exclusive right?
Right.
I wonder why they do in commercial more open listings.
I found that really interesting.
I did too.
I think, at least with my experience with commercial, the loyalty factor and even some of the hand holding that's needed in buying the house that you're going to live in it's just not the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think, most of these investors, they're not tied down to one agent, and everything's just kind of all over the place from what I can tell.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that sometimes that paper of our exclusive right is an illusion.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff in this business.
It's like earnest money.
Right.
It just doesn't, it's worth nothing. Like it's worth the paper it's written on, which is like nothing. What are you going to really sue the seller? Come on, it's going to cost you more
than the earnest money to do it.
Right. It's just silly.
It is.
So, but I see your point, Rachel. It's like, it makes them feel some kind of way.
It just sets the expectation out there. Just like a buyer agency agreement sets the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's what your obligations are to me. This is how we're going to get from point A to point B, working together. And at least
I think though we're assuming that the agents operate like us, like we do. So we're assuming that the agent is going to do what they say they're going to do. The agent's going to have a plan. So if in this world where we're doing 90-day contracts, maybe and we're saying there's maybe a cancellation clause if it's canceled, prior to that. How is the seller protected against an agent that doesn't honor their word or do any marketing?
Right, and that's what's tough, because as another agent watching that happen, you can't interfere with that. You can't say anything negative after the fact. You know what I mean? It's almost like you just have to go in and try and pick up the pieces when it's over.
Is there anything that can be done?
Like an open listing?
I don't know. Yeah, right.
Lovely segue.
Maybe, what if, because there's a lot of I don't know if you guys call for sale by owners, but there's a number of for sale by owners that go up for sale by owner in order to get the most aggressive agent. So that's like their interview process almost.
Yeah.
Right.
So you could start there, interview agent, but then you'd have more people calling. I don't know. People might not want that.
Right.
But I guess to your point, if it's a shorter contract, then the seller by default is protected.
It's protected a little bit more from somebody who may just be dropping the ball and not really doing much.
Right, because it'll be over soon.
It's over soon. Right. And I think if you had a 90-day listing agreement and something like COVID or the 2008 crash happened or whatever it is, something astronomical happened, and you went back to that seller or those sellers and said, hey, this is what I've been doing. Here's our feedback. Here's our showings. Here's everything we've done. I'm going to ask if you would be willing to extend the listing. I think if you've shown your value up to that point, I don't think you're really going to find a seller.
Oh, for sure they will. I mean, I've seen listings that have been on the market for 3 years and it expires and they're like, we're going to go back with the agent. I'm like, why? And then you just have to say, like, do you expect something different to happen without having a tone? Like, are you stupid?
Right. Well, and that's where I go, I would like somebody as loyal as that to be one of my clients.
Not me, because they're not listening probably. They're not reducing the price.
That's true.
I loved your advice just a bit ago on referring it out, because it doesn't happen very often, but you can get in that space 3 months into the listing where you've exhausted your resources and things just aren't clicking with the seller.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time I've just put my head down and kept going forward, and eventually, you part ways with them.
You hope it goes away.
Right.
It never does, Chris. It never does.
Exactly. But to be proactive about referring that out, I think that's a good idea.
Well, I also think that fosters. I've been doing this for like 12 years, and so I've noticed that in that time frame, as agents, we've gotten away from connecting with each other, and I think that fosters like us coming together and being like, okay, Chris, you do really well in these types of houses, like, and you do really well in this area, like, can you help me with this? I think we as agents it would help us sell more also.
Absolutely. Yes.
How long have you been doing it, Rachel?
15 years.
Okay. Are you seeing that kind of trend too?
Yes.
What are you seeing?
I've always tried to really keep my, especially local networking up, because there's been a number of times over the years that myself and one other agent, we'll text each other. I've got this listing. I have a buyer, and we're putting stuff together before we even get it onto the MLS. But there's no other way, that you could potentially do that without having that huge network that you keep up with.
And now I don't think they're really they were sort of allowing us to do that with the coming soon stuff. I don't know if you guys have that in your market, but now they're like poo-pooing the coming soon stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's just gotten to the point where it's you can still do coming soon, but it's on a private network in the MLS. And the only difference between that and the standard MLS is that it doesn't push out to all those third-party portals. So an agent can find it. If I'm driving down the street or a client's driving down the street and there's a coming soon sign in a yard, they should be able to call me, and I, within 24 hours, should be able to find that listing in the private section of our MLS.
Yeah.
So just not pushing it out to the public yet, but there's no true pocket listing at that point.
Right. That's true. I think though we're talking about like fostering the relationships between agents, but then you also start to create this like monopoly or whatever too, which creates a problem, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess the one I'm thinking about in particular, we sold that property for when I talked with the sellers about where we were going to price it, it was at the top end of the range.
Yeah.
That's where we sold it for. And they had 2 toddlers at home, and at that point I said, if we put this up on the open market, I have a hard time believing we're going to find anybody who's going to pay this or more. And if you have this in hand, Ultimately it's their choice, but my God, if somebody came to me and said, this is the top of the range, we've got somebody willing to pay it, and I don't have to show.
And you don't have to show it.
2 toddlers and 2 dogs. Are you kidding?
No kidding. That sounds great.
Right.
Chris, how long have you been in real estate?
8 years.
8 years. Okay.
Yeah.
What has been, have you seen any trends like among communication with agents?
Yeah, I mean, we have a Facebook group for our whole MLS that can communicate to each other.
Which seems hilarious, doesn't it? It seems
does.
like
it's sometimes really great and helpful, and then 80% of the time it's off the rails.
Stupid stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Off the rails.
Like,
yeah.
But that's been good sometimes. And then inter office, we have stuff that we do to keep each other informed on listings that are coming soon and stuff like that. So there's a fine line between, like you just said, about monopolizing and not sharing listings with the rest of the MLS and being smart. Things like what you just said with your seller with 2 toddlers. I think there's definitely opportunity without also not being cooperative, or with being cooperative.
With being, but I think though too, like a lot of companies have like their intranet where they're sharing information, but I think that goes against everything that we kind of stand for. But I mean, that's, I guess, the other one. Should we even have brokerages? I think, Rachel, you were on that one, weren't you?
Yep.
You weren't on that one?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, you were. I thought you were.
Wiping it all out. We're just gonna start over.
Just blowing it up. Yeah. And it's like always what we always talk about too all the time, Chris. It's like, and Rachel, we talk about this too, like having that front end training and communication and on the back end, if you're not producing, you don't get to stay.
Right.
For sure.
Because then I think we can all have a really good conversation about what's best for the seller, what's best for the agent, and create this like win-win situation. Because right now there are times where it can feel combative.
Oh, absolutely.
When it doesn't need to be. It needs to be.
It's
It's already stressful.
Right.
For everybody. I don't know.
So what's your opinion then, as far as, so you've got an exclusive right to sell, you've got open listings, you've got net listings, which is what what was also talked about.
Yeah.
Based on MLS requirements and NAR's policy.
I don't like to base my thing on MLS requirements or NAR policy. I think most of the policies and requirements are annoying.
I know.
And they don't help anybody.
But that's really our exclusive right to sell is really our only option.
It is, but I like the idea of having I don't know if companies mandate the time frame. Maybe some do, some don't.
I'm trying to think. I think it was a strong suggestion, in a couple of
That's what ours is. It's a strong suggestion.
Right, yeah.
But you're not like held to it.
No.
Right, no.
Like even, I mean, I like the idea of like the shorter one. I like the idea of having like that cancellation clause, even if you don't enforce it, of like, there's, we know how much it costs us to have a listing.
Right.
I like it when you're in competition for the listing. I think it can set you apart if you say, I'm willing to take on 3 weeks here, and here's why, and price it right. And when most of your competition is going to be 6 months and a year.
Well, it makes you sound like you know the market too, because you're like, yeah, exactly. Here's why: because the average days on market is 2. Why do you need a 6-month contract when it's going to be sold tomorrow?
Right.
It makes no sense. So what are they hiding?
Their willingness to reduce the price when the original list price doesn't pan out.
Right.
No,
you're right.
That I always look at, is what happens down the road. They're one way during a listing appointment and then turn into something else, once you get rolling.
Yeah, I agree. Well, hopefully we gave some people something to think about. Do we have any final thoughts on this?
What's your thought on the net listing?
The net,
Do you like that?
I think what'd you say?
I said, Chris, do you like those? Or is it legal in Iowa or no?
It is not. Nope.
No.
I don't think it's legal here. Is it legal in Illinois?
You can't do coming soon here either, so.
Really?
You can't what?
We don't do coming soon here either. It's against our MLS.
Oh, Iowa.
No, it's legal in Illinois, but again, the MLS doesn't allow it because it's you can really, I think you're on a very slippery ethical slope with a net listing.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I had at a brokerage recently, as the managing broker, I had an agent bring me a listing written up as a net listing, and I'm like, yeah, you can't do this.
Well, what do you think about?
We're gonna list it for the seller wants 40,000, but we're gonna list it for 50, and he told me I can keep 10. I'm like, well, that's insane, but no, you can't. No, we're not doing
that.
We're not doing it.
What do you think about scaling the commission based on time or sales price?
I've always thought it should be. I don't know a good way to do it, but it never makes sense to me when I spend 2 years with a first-time home buyer, 120,000.
Exactly.
Versus, a $400,000 listing that sells in 2 weeks. I don't feel like I should be compensated the same. But
right. No, I agree though too. I think there's got to be on both ends. I think there should at least be a minimum, so that when you're selling the $80,000 condo, you're not walking away with $300. You know what I mean, or something ridiculous. Especially once you put in your expenses are the same.
Right.
Your staging is the same. Your photography is the same.
Well, with buyers, their expenses are more.
Right. Well, I'm talking about from a listing agent side.
From a listing,
even if you're doing it that way. But an $80,000 condo versus a $1.2 million huge estate, there should be a minimum and a maximum.
Yeah, and we talked about that. I forget when that was, but I know we talked about
the luxury market's a little bit different, and there is, that's not something that I deal with. I don't deal with luxury at all, but probably because I don't have the patience for it. People, that would really not be the place for me. But yeah, I think it doesn't make sense to be charging that same amount of money.
Yeah.
Somebody that's got a $1.8 million estate.
Yeah. So I think to kind of wrap up the discussion on exclusive versus net versus open, we're saying, I think we all agree in that it's like, okay, look at the data and make the contract, make the time frame in the part that makes sense. Like if the average days on market is 9 months, then it makes sense to have a year contract. If the average days on market is 2 days, it doesn't make sense to have a year contract. So is that what we're all saying here?
I would agree with that, yes. And with the caveat that the seller is open to listening to that data and understanding that they still have to price it right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Chris, do you agree?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, we hope you guys learned something today as you were listening. And if you have any referrals, what city are you in, Rachel, in Illinois?
I am in the western suburbs of Chicago.
Chicago, western suburbs. And Chris, where in Iowa?
The Des Moines area.
Cool. Always appreciate you guys being on. Thank you. It was so fun.
Thank you.
See ya.